A career pathway you probably haven't heard before. Mine. Is it important? Maybe, maybe not. Will it help you? I bet I made a lot of mistakes that you can avoid. Anyways, give it a listen, see what you can steal from it, and do better than I did. Welcome back to another episode of the Pilot Network podcast. I'm your host, Adam Uhan, and today we're not going to talk about any of the tools and resources to help you better your life and your career. We're going to specifically discuss my career pathway and how my mistakes might help you make better decisions. The career was long and winding, as they say, but the reality is I made some choices along the way that put me into the position I am now, which is not a bad position. Life's pretty great. I don't know if I would be married with kids at this point, or at least married to the person I am married to. Thank goodness that's the case. Definitely wouldn't have the beautiful children that I have. And moreover, I don't know if I would be living at home in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where I truly love, because I would have been in a different position altogether. So let's take that, set it aside. I have no regrets. However, if you are in a position that I was once in, you might be able to avoid some of the pitfalls and get to where you want to be a little bit quicker. All right, let's start off with my graduation from high school. Yeah, I know that's a while ago. Let's see, 30 years almost. Anyways, it's neither here nor there. 30 years ago, I was in high school and I couldn't really make a decision for myself. I didn't get good grades. I think I had a 2.0 when I graduated. I found out I was going to walk across the high school stage about 48 hours before that graduation was going to happen. Why is that important? I'll explain. When I was graduating high school, I had no clear direction. You see, my grandfather had passed away a few years back, and he got me interested in the military and aviation in general. It was something that I wanted to pursue when I was younger, but after he had passed, I almost had a feeling of retribution against his deceasing. I don't know. I was mad. I was a dumb kid, and I couldn't understand that life was finite and that I no longer had somebody I was very close to in my life because he had shown me so much and taught me so many things. He truly was one of my heroes, along with my parents. And without him, I didn't really know what the next step was. Speaking of my parents, they became my heroes later in life. I was kind of the bad kid in the family and didn't have a lot of respect, didn't treat them well, didn't treat any of my family very well. And I didn't know where I was going to go. When I graduated high school, by dumb luck, I went to the Air Force recruiting office. This is in 1997. I was fresh out of high school, probably maybe a month or so, and it dawned on me that I had no direction. I wasn't going to be able to get a decent job. My dad had worked at Miller Brewing for many years and was reluctant to even help me find work there because he didn't really trust me, and I don't blame him. At the time, I wouldn't have trusted me either. I don't think I trusted myself. So I thought the military will shape me up, and I kind of finally started to see the approach that my grandfather had laid out for me, or at least given me and kind of a look into that world. When I went in, the recruiter was very nice, and he actually, gave me the old, yeah, you can be a pilot from enlisting in the Air Force. I didn't realize how challenging that would have been had I gone down that route. I guess, for better or worse, I was too heavy. I was a fat kid, and they didn't want me. They told me that, yeah, why don't you go to college for a year? You can get on a physical fitness plan, maybe lose some weight, and we can take a look at you after a year in college. I was pretty upset, devastated is what I would say. And I had one option, and that was to go to one university in the state of Wisconsin that let me in because requirement. I got a high enough score in my ACT, and I graduated high school, accredited high school, that one university had to let me in. That was University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. So I went there, and after about 2 weeks, I was miserable. I didn't like school. I was in a relationship that was going nowhere. And I think it ended shortly after that. I don't remember the exact timeline. It's really not that big of a deal. but I was like, I'm going to drop out. School's stupid. I don't like it. I'll figure something else out, even though I had no idea what that something else would be. And as I was driving home, because I was commuting from my parents' house down to the campus, I saw a big banner at another school, Marquette University in Milwaukee, on a building, and it said Air Force ROTC. I remember it really well because it was the old red, white, and blue logo with, I can't remember it was almost like a fake F-22 looking thing, or even a YF-23 on there. It was really cool, and it caught my eye. And I found a parking spot, which would later become almost impossible when I found out that I was going to be driving there and parking in that area at least once or twice a week. I would never get another spot that close unless I got there really early. And I got there probably about, 10 in the morning, and I walked into the building where they had the banner. And as I asked around some other students, I said, hey, is this the Air Force ROTC building? None of them really knew, but one girl said, yeah, if you walk across this little courtyard area, there's a building over there called the BMU, Brooks Memorial Union, and that is where the Air Force ROTC office is. So I walked in, found it it was suite 200 or whatever, and I walked upstairs, walked in, and I said, hey, I'm interested in joining the program. And they sent me down with the unit education officer, Captain Wayne Surratt, and he said, he got his book out, big, huge book of all the benefits, and I said, you don't need to have all that stuff out. Can I become a pilot in this program? And they said, yes. It takes a lot of hard work. And I said, I don't need to hear all that. I just need to know if I can do it. He said, yes. I said, close it up. I'll sign up today. And I got fitted for some uniforms, which I think nowadays would still be too big for me. So I got fitted for some uniforms, was enrolled in the program, and I started, I think, and either the next day or the next week, I was down there for leadership laboratory, which a bunch of you know what that is. And I went to lead lab and was marching around as a first class cadet, or whatever we call them, a 100. And I still was doing really poorly in school. I hadn't figured out the academics portion. Well, the end of the semester, I was failing out of UWM. I had a 1.3 and was on the dean's watch list. And for some reason, there was a little voice inside my head, as well as a mentor. And if she's out there, I'm sure she'll never hear this podcast. Her name was Terry Jones. She was super instrumental in guiding me to the point where I could actually become a contributing member to the ROTC unit, the Air Force, and then more importantly, society at large. When she kind of took me under her wing, I don't know if she saw something or what, because there sure wasn't much to see. But I remember I started running for the first time in my life, because I don't think I could run a mile in under 12 minutes back when I was in high school as a not very good football player, and as a kid who didn't really care much about anything. I started running on the treadmill at the YMCA and at the gym down at UWM, because I knew I had to pass the physical fitness test, and I had to pass the waist measurement, which I was not going to pass. So I started really working on that and focusing on that instead of like being concerned about school. I was like, yeah, whatever, school. Terry pulled me aside and said, Adam, you need to have the academics if you want to go places in your future. So for some reason, all this stuff triggered. My relationship imploded, which was probably a really good thing. In that second semester, I went from a 1.3 on the dean's watch list to a 3.8 on the dean's honors list, or whatever it's called. I don't even remember. And I was awarded the Commander's Leadership Scholarship, which gave me an opportunity to transfer to Marquette, where I then went on and studied political science, because I had no other direction in life. And it was like, somebody said poli-sci to fly. I said, okay, that makes sense. I'll do that. Should have been in theater, which I love doing. It would have benefited me a lot more in public speaking and doing this kind of stuff, but I didn't know any better at the time. It's funny, hindsight's 2020. So there was mistake one. If I was going to go down that road, I'm not an engineer. I'm not a math or physics guy. I like to listen to YouTube and podcasts about physics and space and stuff, but let's be real here. I'm not the guy who's ever going to rewrite any theories on quantum entanglement. So I should have done what I wanted to do. I had the opportunity to study what I really wanted to study. And the reason I say this is for those of you kids out there who are going down this route, or for those of you in that situation now, if you're doing a major because you feel like you have to, it's probably not going to benefit you in the long term. If you do something that you like doing and that's science related, awesome. If you can do that kind of stuff. Or if you have the capability, but you don't really love it, you should go do that. Hard science is better than a theater degree for obvious reasons. There's more opportunities for you out in the world, in my opinion. I could be wrong. But for me, I had a scholarship and was going to go into the Air Force, barring any medical or weird transgressions I might have. And being a theater major would have gotten my grades much higher, which would have given me more opportunity. Now, I had good enough grades, and we were in kind of a pilot shortage at the time. So I got a pilot slot, and I had an opportunity to go to INJEPT, which is Euro-NATO Joint Jet Pilot Training, because of my commander's ranking. We had a small class. That's why my commander's ranking was really high. And I actually turned it down, which I don't quantify as a bad decision, but it could have put me in a place where I could have gone and flown my dream airplane, which is the F-16, never got to fly it, which probably was a good thing, because I don't know if I would have done real well in that world. A lot of work, and I don't know if I had the drive or work ethic to keep up with those guys, let alone the flying skill. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. Later in my career, it came around, but in the beginning, it was very hard for me to keep up with stuff when I got in pilot training, which then I got to. When I got to pilot training, or right before I got to pilot training, was kind of the second big decision piece that I didn't do very well. I had the opportunity to stay on campus for 6 months and do what was called the Gold Bar Recruiter Program, I believe. And instead, and at the same time, I had the chance to pick Pensacola to go to pilot training. I bypassed both of those because I wanted to go to Vance. That's where all my buddies were going. So I went to Vance. Many of you out there know that that was not a smart move. But for me, going to Vance was probably important because I don't know if I could have handled the Navy style of training. I wasn't a big boy yet. I didn't have the capability to do it on my own. My work ethic and my study skill set were not good enough to be able to be given the material and not have a very, very rigorous course of action. Like we did in Air Force pilot training, where we had formal release, where you had to go to the squadron 12 hours a day and sit there and study. If I hadn't had that, I don't know if I would have done it on my own, and I would have definitely failed out of pilot training. So I'm not going to quantify that as a bad decision. The Gold Bar Recruiter thing, that's a different story. I really enjoyed being home and in Milwaukee, and I think I would have liked that a lot. But I did meet some great people. So again, we're not going to quantify that stuff because those are those like intangible regrets and stuff. Who knows what would have happened. So anyways, that was a decision that maybe I could have made a little different. Now, the real big time was in pilot training. Once I got to Air Force pilot training, I was not a good studier. I was terrible. I don't know if it was my inherent ADD or ADHD, or if it was my inability to find material that was difficult for me to kind of retain, finding somebody who could help me with it, or the fact that I was a big, like, will myself through things. So when something I struggled with, the only way I got through it was to just plow through it and just work really, really hard until it clicked. And then when it clicked, it all clicked and fell into place very rapidly. That happened in pilot training. Essentially leading up to my solo, I think I actually failed a ground exam in pilot training, which is incredible. I don't think many people do that before you hit the flight line. When I got to the flight line, I remember I was not doing well leading up to solo, and then I went to NIF for like 8 days from a bad sinus infection, which will absolutely slow you down. And when you're at that phase, it's like the worst time to have that issue happen. So anyways, when I was in pilot training, at that point, I was getting ready for solo, and they were worried I wasn't going to be able to solo. I had that hand flying skills, but my brain just was not catching up to the speed of what was going on, which is kind of embarrassing because the T-37 is just not that fast, and things don't happen, and it's super forgiving, yet I was struggling with it. Well, when we went out for my pre-solo ride, my instructor, Dave, who I got to refuel later on in my career, awesome dude, shout out to Dave, wherever you are in the world today. He went up with me and he said he saw something different that day. And I went out and I did my pattern solo. I got thrown in the dunk tank. I think I was one of the last 3 people, which is a sign that you're not doing very well. But shortly thereafter, things kind of all came together for me, and I rapidly rose up and started doing incredibly well. I found my niche. I wasn't a great aerobatic pilot, but I could get everything done, and I felt like very comfortable in the area, and everything was clicking. And then when we got to instruments, I did very well in the like pre-instrument phase stuff, which was awesome. And I passed all my check rides. I didn't fail anything until my formation check, which is a long, hilarious story, which that takes beers to tell that whole one. And I went through and flew in formation. I did real well, except for the check ride, which I say. And then I got to T1s, and I did really well there until kind of I had a bad week around my nav check, and that's where my scores kind of plummeted. Again, I think I was getting a little too big for my britches now. I felt confident in my skill set, that I didn't need to learn anything new, which was obviously wrong in aviation. I'm still learning. I still don't know, 90% of what there is to know out there. And I think that is the best approach for all pilots, is to always be constantly learning about stuff that you can get better at. Well, when I graduated pilot training, which I graduated with and got the KC-135 to McConnell in Wichita, I made my third, what I would say, now this was a really bad, dumb decision. And this was laziness or fear. I don't know what it was, but I made a mistake. I got all my paperwork ready to go get my military comp stuff. So when you graduate pilot training, for those of you who don't know, you are able to take a military comparative test, compensatory test, whatever it's called. But you're able to go get your commercial ticket just by taking a written test, because you passed Air Force pilot training. And I went in and I had it done, and I didn't have a study guide, and I failed it. And I never retook it. I didn't go back. Big mistake. I then went to Altus and got KC-135 done. And I came back. I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to take this test before I go anywhere else. So I took the test again and I passed it. This time I knew what I was doing, and I went in and I finished up really fast. But I never went and actually got my certificate for it. So I never went to the FSDO and had them submitted the paperwork and had the sign off done and have my commercial ticket. Where this where this mistake came to roost was not too long after that, which normally this would happen later in my career, but it didn't happen but like 3 years later. So I went to McConnell. We were busy deploying a lot due to all the stuff in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I was one of the lucky guys to get a 4-shaped out and go to the reserves by request. That's another long story that involves a couple of frosty beverages. But when I left and I went up to my reserve unit, I didn't have my military comp stuff done. Or I had it done, but I never actually went and had anybody certify it. Where this problem happened, or why this caused a problem, was I would have had the time shortly thereafter to go get my ATP. And if I recall, some guys were getting hired without ATPs at this time. Continental had just started hiring again right around that 2006 to 8 range. I think there was a couple other airlines, maybe Delta had started as well. I don't really recall all who was and who wasn't. And then I also got an offer from a friend of mine who wanted to introduce me to the chief pilot at Compass. And they were desperate because they were starting Compass up as a brand new regional carrier. And if I would have gone to Compass, I would have probably, I wouldn't say probably, let's just say I would have gotten hired. Just we'll ignore the fact that maybe I didn't know what I was doing as far as interview prep and all that stuff. And who knows, but friend of a friend hooking me up network wise. If I would have gotten hired at Compass, I would have flowed through it to Delta in 2010. But I didn't have my comp stuff done. I also had a bunch of friends who were roughly the same equivalent I was, who got hired at Continental around the same time. And they all ended up at United, which by the way is right down the street from me, and that's not where I fly. So so you narrowed it down right there. I would have been driving to work, but I don't do that. So that was a huge impact on my career. for many, many reasons. And in the last podcast with Dave Hesserin, we talk about that. That is one of the simple, best things that you can get done early in your career. So it's kind of buried. You never have to think about it again. So you can be ready when these opportunities present themselves. The next thing that occurred was a little bit down the road. I had the opportunity to move to Tampa, Florida with my reserve unit as an air reserve technician, which is essentially a civilian working in a military job. You have to have a military position within the unit, and you're kind of doing both, but you go to work every day in a flight suit kind of a thing. And I was doing that, but I didn't yet have my ATP. I had been to instructor school at this point. I could easily go get my ATP, but I was kicking the can out of laziness, wanted to just go out and party with my friends and have a good time. And the work would come when the work came. And the thing that I noticed was I was putting myself kind of behind the eight ball. Sure enough, the time came when I wanted to go back home, and Milwaukee had an opportunity in their guard unit. So I took that job, and I realized that I didn't have anything but the military. And I realized that when I had gone to the reserves, they didn't have a lot of days and dollars to provide for me. So I was working a fairly full schedule, but for way less than I was making on active duty. And at the same time, when I got to I was afraid that the same thing was going to happen to the guard. So at that time in my career, I was in a position where I didn't really have any civilian thing to fall back on. So I had to go get my ATP really fast, especially when I had fired off my resume to all these different places and realized that without an ATP, I wasn't very competitive. So I had to find somebody, all ATPs down in St. Peter, Clearwater, and try to get this knocked out like really fast. I was lucky because they had an opening in their schedule, and I was able to find the DE and the instructor and get all this stuff taken care of. That was really, really stressful. A period of my life that I didn't need any extra stress on, but I added to myself because I made poor decisions up to that point. I didn't do it earlier when the time was right. At the same time, I had an opportunity to get ACSC done. Now, for those of you who don't know what ACSC is, it's a professional military education course, which is called Air Command and Staff College, which helps you get promoted through your career. So you go from captain to major if you have ACSC done. I did not do ACSC. I took one test after I finished my squadron officer school, because as a GS-13, you can go and do an advanced class, the next class, even if you're not that rank yet. I took one test, I passed it, and then it was January in Tampa, Florida. The weather was beautiful. Gasparilla was coming up. If you don't know what that is, check it out. And I stopped. I just stopped. So I said, I'll do it later. Well, later in my career, I would have had opportunities to promote sooner, meaning more money, meaning maybe more responsibility, getting into command if I wanted to do that, which wasn't something I was really that interested in. And I could have done it the easy way too, just take the tests. They shifted that because it used to be you just take, I think, 5 tests. You go to a study firm, you take the test, and then you pass. They shifted that whole coursework to a online class version, which was more seminar based, and there was papers to write and tests you had to take and all this other stuff. I was not interested and did not do that. I was one of the lucky ones who got promoted without ACSC in the ROTMA program, but I did promote later in my career, which was not the end of the world, but it was something that I did miss out on opportunities to make a little bit more money and have some different adventures in the military that I otherwise missed out on. So that was another thing that was kind of concurrently, not as impactful, but still something that I had a chance to do that I decided against. After that, things kind of settled down. I got in the Guard. I started flying for a Part 135 carrier. And I learned a ton by doing contract work. This is where I talk about, if you've been to TPNX before, or if you come this year, you'll hear me say, open your aperture and stop staring at the one forever job out there that you have to have, because there's so many cool opportunities in aviation. And if given those opportunities, take advantage of them, especially when you're young. You're never going to get them again. And they're going to provide you some great memories. They're going to provide you some great experience. They're going to give you an awesome story. They're going to give you some credibility, and they're going to teach you how to fly airplanes differently than you ever flown them before. When I was flying contract work in Afghanistan, I was flying a Beech 1900. I'd never flown a turboprop. I'd never flown close to the ground. I'd never flown VFR only for work stuff. And all this stuff was totally new to me and really cool. It got old after a little while. I didn't do it that long, but I did it long enough to know it wasn't my career choice. But it was something that did give me a lot of good airmanship, technique, procedural skill knowledge that I otherwise wouldn't have had, and gave me a lot more confidence in flying outside of a military cockpit. I then left that job and I went to Atlas, where I flew the 747. Again, same thing, learned a ton. That was a very difficult training program, one of the hardest ones I'd ever been in my life. Some people say, really? Even after the military? Oh, yeah. When I went and flew the Beech 1900, that was like the easiest training program outside of some 121 stuff. After you get used to a 121 program, it's not too challenging. You just got to come prepared. But in the Atlas 121 world, that was really tough. That was kind of old school oral exam. You really had to be able to kind of build the airplane. And you had to be in Miami almost the whole time. There was very little going home, which was kind of rough. I'd been on the road for a lot and I was kind of tired of it. I didn't really understand that because I'd been on the road so much for so long in my career at that point. And I was young, so it didn't really bother me that much anyways. When I was done with it, though, I was really glad to be home. I was really glad to be like, that part of my life was kind of over and I moved on to the next phase of it. After flying the 747 around the world a lot, I realized that that wasn't necessarily the kind of flying I wanted to do forever. And we had some contract stuff at Atlas that wasn't great. And the majors had started opening the hiring gates up again. And I was being prompted by a lot of individuals at Atlas, hey, do you have your apps in? And I did. I finally put my apps in and I got hired at the carrier I work for now and have for the last 11 years. And it's been a really great experience. I've gotten to raise my kids, be with my family. I don't know if I would have had the disability coverage that I've had and the wonderful support that I've had while being out for the last almost year because of this stupid shoulder and back issue, which are getting better. And hopefully we'll get to the point where I can, sit down for more than just doing a podcast before I got to go do all my PT and stretch out and look like a moron and get back in the seat and be able to sit in the seat for, a while and go back out on the road. I'm looking forward to those days. They will come when they come. But right now, focus on this. Anyways, sidetrack a little bit there. The fact of the matter is, and why I tell you all this and why I kind of shared my background and my history is so that you can look at your own career path and your own history in aviation and realize that you may have made a misstep here or there, but it's not the end. It's kind of the beginning. It's the beginning of the next chapter or something that's a totally new adventure. And it gives you the opportunity to go out and take advantage of those kind of things. The younger you are, the more opportunities and adventures you can go have in aviation. You will not be able to find anything quite like it unless maybe you're a rock star or a professional athlete. And even then, the scheduling and the restrictions that you have. And if you're famous, that's a whole nother thing that none of us really have to worry about. At least I don't. It is one of those things where we've got such a cool, unique set of skills that we can apply, go out and see the world and do so many interesting, fun things because unlike other people who are flying in the back of our airplanes, they're taking that opportunity to rest or watch a movie or whatever. And then when they get to where they're going, they have to work. When we get to where we're going, we get some time off. We get to actually see where we are, where our destination is. And that is cool. Anyways, I hope this helped a little bit. Just giving a brief summation of my history in aviation, how I got to where I am, and how you too can avoid some of the pitfalls, or you can avoid some of the pitfalls, and you too can take advantage of some of the opportunities and venture that awaits. I hope this helped. If it did, drop us a line at heyguys@thepilotnetwork.com. Join us on TPN Pro. Let me know. I'm always open to hear whatever anybody thinks about what I've done and what I could have done better. And moreover, what we can do as a network to continue to grow and build off of this awesome community. and explore the adventures and opportunities that await all of us in aviation. And as I always say, keep the shiny side up, greasy side down, fly safe, everybody.